Hi everyone, my name is Avram K and you're watching Alfei Panim Parshas Vayikra 2025. Very often when we see Rabbanim give a drasha on Shabbos or on a Yom Tov, they'll very often try and draw something from current events into what they're talking about. And I was fortunate to find just such a drasha from about 100 years ago that a Rav Avram Naftali Galanti in his Sefer Mashal U'Melitza gives on Parshas Vayikra. Now, what was going on in the world 100 years ago? Well, it was right after the Great War, which became known afterwards as World War I, and it was also in the aftermath of the Communist Revolution. The pasuk says, "Oy karbano min habakar zacha tamim yakrivenu al pesach ayal moyed yakriv oisai l'tzaynai lifnei Hashem." If his offering is a burnt offering, he shall offer a male without blemish. He shall offer that the Ohel Moed, the door of the tent of meeting, that it may be accepted before Hashem. The commentary of Rashi on that pasuk says, "Yakriv oisai," he shall bring it, "Molamed shekayfen oisai," to teach us that they would coerce someone. A person who had obligated himself to bring a carbon and then failed to do so was subject to the Beis Din compelling him to bring it. Yachal Bal Karchal, I would think it means even against his will. Talmud Lema Lir Tzaynai. No, it has to be according to his will. HaKetzad, what does that mean? How is this possible? Kaifen Oisai Ad Sheyomer Vaitzani. They should coerce him and force him until he says, "I want to do it." We live in complicated times with unprecedented levels of social and political strife. It permeates every area of our life, and there's a struggle within the Torah world very often to try and ascertain what direction to take and with whom we should affiliate ourselves. In this following drasha that I discovered, as I said, he was talking about the situation and the geopolitical situation in the world following World War I and the Russian Revolution. As you may remember, during World War I, Germany's success on Russia's western border caused massive shortages of grain and bread, leading to intense civil unrest inside Russia. Senior Russian officials believed that if Tsar Nikolai abdicated the throne, then order could possibly be restored. Unfortunately, it led instead to the Bolsheviks seizing power and plunging Russia into decades of communist oppression. With these current events as a backdrop, the author of Mashal U'Melitza offers some timeless Torah wisdom to give us an insight on how to view and relate to a changed and complicated world. In light of the pasuk that we quoted above in Rashi's commentary, we are faced with two disparate ideas, coercion and willingness, which seem to be mutually exclusive. One who wishes to do something doesn't need to be forced, and someone who needs to be forced cannot be said to be willing. The Rambam in Hilchos Gerushin famously addresses this problem. He writes, if, however, a person's Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, presses him to not keep the observance of a mitzvah or to be over on Aveira, to transgress on something that he was not supposed to do, and he was coerced, he was forced until he performed the action that he was obligated to perform, or alternately, he stopped himself before doing the forbidden action, he is not said to have been forced against his will, because deep down he really wanted to do the right thing. It's only the Yetzer Hara that was preventing him. In Russia in 1917, there were two extremes at play. In very simplistic terms, the aristocracy, called White Russians, believed everything belonged to them. They had ruled ruthlessly under the Tsar for generations, keeping the vast majority of the populace in abject poverty. The usurpers, the Red Russians, the Bolsheviks, promised freedom and prosperity to the masses, putting an end to domination by a privileged few. In essence, they were saying that everything belonged to them. At the root of each of their claims, there does seem to be at least a grain of truth. The White Russians said they were the legitimate rulers after the Tsar relinquished power. They represented the wealthy and powerful upper class of Russian society, who basically owned all or most of the resources, the mines, the forests, the animals, the farmland. They claimed that they owned and controlled the economy was true. And like anyone else who owned something, they felt justified in defending their ownership. The Bolsheviks' claims were simply that the status quo was grossly unfair and immoral, and they were therefore justified in taking what they were owed. There was definitely some truth to the claim that they were being taken advantage of and kept in poverty. The Mashal Umalitza notes that the extremes of the Tsarists ultimately brought about the extremes of the Bolsheviks. We see a similar idea by Yosef and his brothers. Yosef tells his brothers his dream. He says, "Behold, we were tying sheaves of wheat in the field, and my sheaf rose and even stood straight, and behold, your sheaf surrounded and bowed down to my sheaf." When Yosef related this dream, his brother's hatred was propelled to a new level. It was the implied arrogance, and as he said, "And my sheaf rose and stood straight, and yours surrounded and bowed down to my sheaf," that seemed to inflame their anger. It wasn't only the idea that Yosef might rule over them in some way, but that he would do it in an aloof, arrogant manner. So what, after all, is the Torah's view? Those with money, power, and resources certainly own what they have, and nobody should steal it from them. On the other hand, that should not be at the detriment of society. They should understand the obligation and responsibility that money brings with it. The Mishnah in Avos says, "Ha'omer shali shali v'shalcha shalcha zu mida beininus." Someone who says, "What's mine is mine and what's yours is yours," that's normal. That's a normal reaction. V'yesh Omrim, and some say, "Zu midas Sodom." This is the character trait of the people of Sodom, the evil, wicked people of Sodom. The question is asked, how could this be called midas Sodom? Recognizing boundaries between one's property and another's would seem to be common sense. The answer is that it depends who's talking. If a poor person says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, that's mida beininus, that's average, that's normal. But when a wealthy person says it, it's midas Sodom. To not recognize that your affluence carries with it a responsibility, that's midas Sodom. Therefore, the ideas of willingness and coercion can and must exist. The Torah recognizes private property and the rights of the owner, but there's a greater morality as well. The wealthy have an absolute obligation to support the community at large, as well as individuals in need. And at one time, the Beis Din had the power to apply various measures to ensure that those with means fulfill their obligations to the Klal. And while Klal Yisrael's needs today are very, very great, and we must all strive to do more to help one another, I can say from firsthand experience that we are privileged to have individuals in our midst whose kindness and generosity cannot be overstated. Mi ka'amcha Yisrael, there are some wonderful Baalei Chesed and Baalei Tzedakah among us, but we need to do more. Have a wonderful Shabbos. My name is Avram K., and you're watching Alfei Panim.